Hey everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about break. So the break keyword is just this, break. And in general, we're going to apply this within a loop, either a for loop or a while loop. And we're going to use that to exit the loop. So I can give a quick demonstration of what this looks like for I in range. And let's just go from 0 to 200. Now, if I equals, well, let's just say greater than. If I is greater than 100, then we break. And otherwise, we're going to print I, and then down here, I'll just put print, we're done. And notice this. See how this is in white? I actually have to escape the apostrophe there in order for that apostrophe to fit within these single quotes for the string. All right, so if I run this, notice we've got 0, 1, 2, all the way down to we're done, right? So that's a pretty simple explanation of a break. And you might want to consider when to use break, okay? The general rule of thumb is that if you don't need to continue performing loops, then you can break out of the loop. And it's a minor optimization, really, when it comes to, the amount of computation you need to perform. But it is that minor optimization. You might as well do it. So yeah, you can use it to exit a for while loop. You can also use it to avoid infinite loops when you're using a while. Now, we haven't covered while loops at this point, I don't think. So I'm not going to get into that until we get into while loops themselves. So we'll just look at this in terms of the is prime function, which is a common function that you should be able to write. So is prime is going to be just, committing a function that tells you if a number is prime. So if prime of some number n, and by default, we'll assume that a number is prime, right? That's, this is our flag, right? This is our Boolean flag. And if it turns out the number is not prime, we're going to set this prime to false. So, let's say there's another condition here. If n is 1, then we're going to return false, right? We could say, prime gets false, but we don't need to do that. We can just return false. And, our function is going to return some Boolean value, whatever that is. And another case that we want to cover is if n is 2. In that case, we're going to return true. And we're just doing this because, it makes our code a little bit simpler when we write the actual logic here in a for loop. So else, we'll go from for some number in the range of 2 to n. And, I'll show you another little optimization here in a second. If n modulo num is 0, right? If n is ever divisible by all the numbers between 2 and 1 less than itself, if it's divisible by any of those numbers, then we could just return false here. But I want to demonstrate the break. So we could say prime gets false, and then we would say break. And that's going to end our for loop. And ultimately, we can return prime. Now, there's a couple small things we could do here. We could avoid this break altogether and just return false. And it's kind of better to do that, honestly. At that point, you don't need this. In fact, you don't need that, and you don't need this. But we're demonstrating break here, so we'll just leave these in for now. The other thing you can do is divide n by 2. So, you know, you're going to do less checks here. So we'll divide that by 2, and then we're actually going to add 1 on the other end of this. So if you imagine the number 24, we don't want to go between 2 and we don't want to go from 2 to 11. We want to go from 2 to 12 because 24 is divisible by 12. It shouldn't matter in almost any case. Like you're gonna, that's sort of a edge case that offhand I don't even know if you need to account for it. But you know, this is just a slight optimization. You're going to have less loops if you do it this way. So let's just print is prime of 13. Let's make sure that this is working for a prime number. And oh, float object cannot be interpreted as an integer. Of course it can't. Let's just cast this to an int. And run that again. True. Okay, so 13 is prime. And let's look at 26. And 26 is not prime. So we get a false here. Notice, what we could do to demonstrate that we're seeing this is let's print the divisors. So I'll just do this. Divisor is, I'll make this an f string, and we'll just print num. And let's watch this one more time for 26. So 26 is divisible by 2. Let's do something a little bit different. Let's do 93. Of course, divisor 2, divisor 3. And we're not checking anything beyond that. At that point, we break out, and we just return false because we've set the prime flag to false.